Ooh, good morning. Back in the game, Kai.
Back in the game.
How long have we been trying to do this, my friend?
Hello, what?
How long have we been trying to put this together?
Well, it's been a couple of weeks, probably since it was close to probably a month.
Yeah.
Probably a month. Because when you hit me first, we were right in the middle of the closure. We just got the announcement from the governor that it would be closed through 2 weeks. So I was scrambling, trying to get things together, juggling the 5-year-old being at home with her homeschooling situation and the 7-month-old who's just trying to figure out the world. And so here we are.
Well, let's do this before we even go into the meat and potatoes. I know who you are and some of your accomplishments, but a lot of the people watching don't. Tell them who you are and why you are and why I look at you as an authority to talk to about this.
Okay, thanks. So I'm Kai Adderley. I'm from Philadelphia. I'm back in Philadelphia now after 25 years from graduating from high school and heading on down to Georgetown, where I was a student athlete there. Track and field was my sport, and ended up in education after I graduated, and was in ed policy for a short time. And I had a really close friend that said to me, well, how could you create policy when you don't know what it's like to be in the classroom? You don't know like what it's like to be in a school. And she really pushed me and encouraged me to get into the classroom. And so I felt myself bored with the policy side of things because I wasn't there to help with the implementation. And I said, okay, you know what? I need to get into the classroom. And I joined Teach for America. I was a sixth grade teacher in Washington, D.C. Had a lot of success as a sixth grade teacher. And are you still there? Okay,
Yeah,
there you are.
yeah.
And I started to realize that, leadership was a big part of why I felt schools were failing in urban communities. And I just tried to do everything I could and use every resource I could to improve the experience of the children I was working with in DC. And I got recognized as DC new teacher of the year, and I got recruited by organization KIP uh, charter schools, KIP National Charter Schools, Knowledge is Power program, and recruited to open up my own school. So at the age of 28, 29, I was tapped to found a school, a middle school, fifth through eighth grade school in Brooklyn, New York. I was the founding principal and school leader there for 7 years. And during that time, we had a lot of success. And one of the components of my program was that all the children there did capoeira. I can get into a whole long story of why that was, but I believe that there was always a mental aspect to being successful in life. And I thought capoeira was something that the Brazilian martial art was something that could bring that out in the kids while also keeping them physically fit, aware of the African diaspora, pick up a language along the way, and teach a little self-defense as well in Brooklyn Crown Heights section. Anyhow, I got recognized again by some individuals who were working on a think tank and education policies and programs best practice in Brazil. And in 2011, I got an invitation down to live in Brazil actually and help with different organizations create programs around education leadership and take a lot of the best practice from charter schools to Brazil and what have you, teacher training, principal training, and just best practice from urban communities in the U.S. So I lived in Brazil in Rio de Janeiro from 2011 through 2000. What is it? Right after the Olympics. So yeah, after 2016, early 2017, I relocated back to the U.S. By then, I had a 3-year old daughter. She was turning 3 in 2017, and we just thought it was the best time to get back to the U.S. So I've been here between New York and Philadelphia, and finally relocated back to Philly in the last year and a half, 2 years. And since I've been back, I got back into the trenches, and I'm now currently, while I maintain my consulting business and help leaders in education spaces around the country and around the world, think through best practice. I'm running a K through 8th charter school in the Philadelphia area called Vision Academy. We have about 375 students, 60 staff members in grades K through 8, coming from a few different districts in the city and meeting up in Lansdowne, PA, where we have our school. So I've been in the education space, just helping people think through strategically best practice from a leadership standpoint. My expertise or the area where I tend to focus is education leadership. I believe that it all starts with the leadership and anything in any organization. So I try to practice it and preach it as well as help others along that journey.
So if I'm not mistaken, just so I can give everybody a quick heads up, it's a VACS charter school?
The school?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Vision Academy Charter School. Yeah, vacharterschool.org is the website.
So let me go ahead and give everybody a peek of this real quick, just so they can know if they want it while they're listening, because I believe, I believe that there, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Gotcha.
That's it. And I was going to go really quickly, just talk about my belief in education and how I got to this particular school. We maintain, I've always believed in maintaining relationships with the students. Education is one of those professions where you don't necessarily see the results of your work at the end of the day or the end of the week or even the end of the year. When you're working with a child, you're trying to think of backwards planning. You're trying to think what type of citizen of the world, are we creating here? And so you might not get the full results of that work until 20 years later. I've taught a lot of children when they were 10 who are now 25 and 30 years old, who reach back out to me and remember lessons and teachers that they've had and experiences that they've had while they were 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, that have created a trajectory for them in their life. So this particular school, I was actually in Brazil, and I got a phone call from a parent of a child who I taught in 2005. I was her principal in New York, and the family relocated to the Philly area, and their younger son was in this school. And the parent said to me, Mr. Adderley, you started charter schools, you help people start schools. This school is in their, second year. Would you mind, helping them with, in the same fashion that you work with other schools? And because of that relationship, I said yes immediately. I was on the beach in Ipanema, and I said, you know what, the next time I'm in the US, I'm going to stop by. And that stopping by turned into a coaching relationship where I was coaching the CEO there. And the CEO had a family situation and moved to another part of the United States. And the school was left without leadership, and the board approached me about running the school as the CEO and principal. And it was right when the transition from Brazil was happening. And so because of this relationship where I was a child's principal in 2005, I'm now here working with her younger brother. He's a 7th grader currently, working with the same family, 15 years later. So, the biggest thing I think about education success and reform and how we're going to get better at this is we have to understand the longitudinal goal of education and looking at backwards planning. Like I said earlier, what do we want when we walk into a school? We want to see these children 10 and 15 and 20 years later having success and options in their life. So I was really fortunate and blessed to I kept my same phone number just because I want kids to be able to reach out to me whenever.
Hey man, you know what? I always have a great respect for teachers because it requires a level of patience that,
Whew.
yeah. Children, here's the thing. I find it easier when I work with adults, or at least older students, than when I do my coaching or different things that I've done, because it's easier to scare them. You can scare a grown man into obedience and say, "Hey, listen, the amount of money you're paying me for this. If you don't, they'll go, oh, you're right. With children, it's hard. I can't scare kids, and I can't get that, listen. And they just think it's I don't know.
Right. Well, I'll piggyback that, and where you use the word scared, I've definitely scared some children. I have some funny stories about that. One kid, because of my eyebrows and the way I have a natural arch, she literally asked me one time. She said, "Are you part, Lucifer, or do you go get your, eyebrows scaped?" It's one or the other.
That was her. Like, I would be like, how dare you say that to me? I'm an adult.
Exactly. But is that relationship that we're talking about. So where you say fear, I would call it engagement, right? It is very, very, very challenging. And I know we're going to talk about school and education during this time of the quarantine, but that has been the biggest challenge, and always will be, I believe, is getting young people engaged in the material that we're presenting to them and to the messages that we're presenting. So as a teacher, as an educator, our first job is to create engagement. Kids they gotta show up. They gotta be in the chairs. They gotta be in the desks, and we gotta have a show for them, have something for them to care about. Where adults, you would think or hope that at 20 or 25, a younger adult is in tuned and know what they should care about because they have bills to pay and they have lives to support and they have reasons for wanting to get the knowledge that you're providing, where a child is sitting there at 10 saying, why the hell should I listen to you?
Let me do this first. I put some of your information there in the comment section for people who want to do some further checking or send you messages or connect with you on LinkedIn. And for the people watching who've been watching, I always go with the first thing. Make sure you click the subscribe button and the like and all that good stuff, because I talk about three main things on this channel. One, I talk about a lot of world travel, not just Brazil, where I'm living now as a permanent resident. I've lived in about 15 countries. I talk a lot about money, which is arguably my favorite subject. Because of my career as a financial professional, saving, investing, everything from traditional investments to cryptocurrency to avoiding debt. Got more coming on that soon, especially with this whole money situation. But the third, I like to talk about global issues with my friends. I'm fortunate enough to have friends like Kai, who are successful and accomplished men and women. And we can talk about things on a level that makes it relevant to a lot of people. And this channel has really grown because of that. So I want everybody to make sure they share it as well on your Facebook or Twitter or something like that. Interestingly enough, I'll show you something else. I don't know whether or not you probably didn't because you're a very busy man like me. There was a video that I did with my friend Letitia, and we call it Homeschool Havoc, because the homeschool people right now are having a last laugh. I hope everybody goes and checks that out, because she gave resources on homeschooling and just what it's like. Because I have so many friends that are smart, educated.
Yeah, I'll check it out.
And they're finding out just because you're educated, multilingual, and smart does not make you a good teacher.
Does not make you a good teacher at all.
They're struggling so hard trying to figure out how to teach their children at home. But
exactly.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't have
hopefully this experience will bring a level of empathy and conversation between parents and schools that wasn't there before, because there's some families who obviously don't have great experiences with school themselves. They drop their kids off and they go on about their business, and so when we call or when we ask them for support, so it's not that they don't want to. Sometimes they just don't know how to support. And so I think now that they're getting a glimpse of what the day is like, what it's like working with their child all day long, there'll be hopefully a different conversation we're able to have once schools are open back up.
And this goes to that whole open back up thing. I think the first time I reached out to you about this, I said, hey, I just read that the New York City school system is about to close. Now, for those who don't know, the New York City school system is the largest in the United States. It's 1.1 million. 1.1 million in the New York school system. And
Massive.
impact of that. I mean,
Right.
how do we even quantify? Well, let's not even talk about money or parents first. Let's talk about children. There are how many children in that system? 1.1 million. Let's not talk about the extended, workers and such. How are we going to quantify is it right to use the word damage done to children being pulled out of school right now in, what month is it? March. So as of March,
Right.
they're not going to finish their school years. Oh, let me say good morning.
So
You got an early one. Thank you for teaching the kids, Kai. There, you got some appreciation, my friend.
hey, thank you.
And dear sister, reigning woman, I appreciate you coming by, and thank you so much for pointing that out for everybody. I'll show them my resume and stuff later as well. And I always encourage people, no matter who you are, no matter where you go, I tell people that she brings a very opposite style of conversation than I do. She's a little calmer than I am. And I always tell people, listen, no matter what, if you can, I want you to go check out her page. I'll show it to you guys because she has a lot to do there. Let's see.
Nice.
Where'd it go? The good thing about YouTube is there's enough room for everybody. You can be her friend and mine.
Yeah,
so when we talk about,
it looks like you share that with me when we get off.
I will do. I'll put it in the comments right now. What I wanted to say though was, right now we're dealing with children. I mean, an unprecedented number of children who are going to be lost. And
yeah. So interesting. There was an unprecedented number of children lost before we closed. So there's a struggle. There's an issue in our education program, in our education system, that is now being magnified. Because children are now at home, now you got to think about not only what they're missing from a classroom standpoint, but the wraparound services that are provided in a school setting, everything from meals to counseling services to, just having a safe place to go to, a safe person to talk to, occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy. So we have children who, relied on our system to be able to, become a functioning adult in our world. And so when the system has been disrupted as it has, we're going to have a lot of tough questions to answer in the weeks and months and years to come. We often talk about the summer slide, where children get out in June and come back in September, and they've forgotten everything they learned from the previous year. And so now we're going to have a gap, a slide. I guess we're going to call it the Corona slide.
By slide, you mean they backslide, meaning
they backslide.
Go up, and then 3 months away, they drop in their ability.
They lose the content, right? They forget the content. They lose the content. Different schools have summer school programs that support children throughout the summer so they don't lose as much. But again, depending on the neighborhood and the place we're talking about here, the resources can be very scarce. There's a lot of, you're in Brazil. I used to marvel at the fact, I remember when I first got to Brazil, I said, well, what do the kids do in the summer? And they said, what do you mean, what do they do? They go to the beach. School's out. They don't do anything. And I was like, oh my goodness, how do you account for that gap that happens in the months or weeks that children are not in school, that come back in September and have forgotten and slid backwards with their ability? So now we're going to have a period of, most states in the United States right now are closed throughout the rest of the school year. Bless you. Bless you.
Excuse me.
All right, I'm going to need you to quarantine yourself for about 14 days, and we can continue this interview then. So now we're going to have a period. My school was closed on March 12th, and most schools closed between, the beginning of March and mid-March, and children are not slated to go back into the building until September. So depending on the quality and opportunity to provide a virtual experience for the children over the next, what is that, 5-6 months from March to September, we're going to see a slide. We're definitely going to see a slide and a gap that I don't know how we're going to fill.
So
I'm
if
listening. I'm
we are
actually going to
looking
get
at,
my charger. Go ahead.
okay, if we're looking at a summer slide only magnified, right? Because it
Right.
doesn't look like they're going to be back in school until September,
Right.
correct? So we've got April,
Exactly.
May, June, July, August, September, 6 months, half a year with no formal education. Are you an advocate of what they're doing by saying what they want to do is say whatever your grades were at this point in time, you're going to carry that. And if you were passing, you pass forward. If you were not, you're being held back. So it looks like Brother Kai did not get to his phone charger fast. Oh, wait, here he comes.
All right, I'm back. Sorry about
Charge.
that. I lost you for a moment. Yeah, I had to get my phone charged. I didn't realize I didn't charge it last night.
Gotcha. Well, what I was asking is, if we're looking at 6 months with no formal schooling and education, are you an advocate of the school saying, okay, if your grades were passing at this point, you pass forward. If they were not, you fail?
So that is actually that's the conversation that we're engaged in deeply right now and trying to figure out. So the first children that I worry about are our children who, yes, were at risk at the time of failure. So most schools by March, and timing matters, right? If this happened in November or October, we'd be having a different conversation. But the fact that this happened in March, in on the East Coast, and in DC, New York, Philadelphia areas, our school system is typically September through June. Some other states, and mostly in the South, their school years look a little different. Maybe start in August. But anyway, the point is by March, you're pretty much approaching the end of your third quarter. And so you're a finance guy. If you think about, failure for 3 quarters, what does that
Oh,
mean
there's
for
no
your
such thing.
year?
Failure for 3 quarters means you just in the wrong career. Failure for 3 quarters means you might start putting in applications down at the Quickie Mart.
Exactly. So typically, if someone's failed 3 quarters, we send out letters to families. We have meetings with families saying, "Hey, there's a high probability that your child's going to need to repeat the grade."
Now, wait a minute.
Right?
You don't wait until the 3 quarters to tell them that. I'm hoping they get letters before this.
They get letters from quarter one. They get letters from not even quarter one, from halfway through quarter one. Anytime, every quarter there's progress reports halfway through. And there's an opportunity to, have conversations and to fix this thing. By the time you get to the third quarter, if you're still on that list, you get a more formal letter that suggests that, your child is going to repeat, because you don't want to tell families this information the last day of school, right? Somebody might blow your school up. you want
Let's
to
not ever make
brace
that
them
joke
for
again, Brother Kai. You know what? I have friends who have become teachers out of a sense of, I really want to be the greatest teacher in the world. As a matter of fact, a man who became very successful in the financial industry where I am did it after 5 years of being a teacher, because he's a very smart man. He taught science and some kind of classical history to 11th and 10th graders. He was going to be the greatest teacher in the world. I remember him in college. He was so excited. After 5 years, I watched his heart break. Like, I watched his heart break after realizing what he was up against in schools. And he said, what broke his heart every day, it was never the children. It was parents who wouldn't admit their children needed help. It was parents who wouldn't admit their children may need remediation. It was parents who wouldn't come to the meetings when he would call them on his own lunch hour saying, please, your child needs to talk to you and me in the same room so he can understand. After 5 years, he said he couldn't do it anymore.
Yeah. So I, there's definitely that sentiment and feeling that I've heard. I go into to conversations or lectures or what have you, and people say, "Oh, the parents, the parents, the parents, the parents, the parents. They won't do this. They won't do that. They won't do this." And I say, I push back a little bit, and I say, well, you know, let's let's not forget the conditions that some of our parents are in mentally and physically, right? There are parents who had such a terrible experience in school, they are terrified to walk into a school building because of their own personal experience, right? And the other caveat I'll lay out on the line here is whenever people say, "Oh, public schools are failing," and schools are failing, I often ask them, "Okay, what zip code is this school in? Tell me more about the zip code. What else is failing in this area?" "Oh, there's no supermarkets. There's no good medical and hospitals in the area. There's no good infrastructure for senior citizens. There's often failure all around that zip code. So why wouldn't the school also be a failure as well?" Right? So public schools are not failing. Neighborhoods and communities are failing. And who's failing those communities? What communities are infested with, drugs and crime? Those are the communities that have the bad schools. Those are the communities where people say, "Oh, well, parents don't want to be involved." Parents want to be involved. Parents don't have the tools, the time, and the know-how often to be involved. So what I've always worked in schools and considered under-resourced areas. Part of my charge, part of my mission has always been to arm the parents with information. So the day that they decide their child's coming to our school, we give the parents a contract as well that says, "Guess what? We're going to do X, Y, and Z for your child." And we give them a laundry list. And we say, "Our expectation is that you meet us right there as well." Right? And so if you can't come to school, guess what? That's fine, because we understand you might have 2 or 3 other children and 2 jobs, and might not have transportation, and you just can't make it to the school. But meet us at the corner store or the subway station. Let us over. We'll come to your house. We'll meet you on your steps, because we cannot not have this conversation about your child and their future. So let's not make an excuse of why this conversation can't happen. So we've taken that approach for years, that we will come to you. You don't have to come to us. We'll come to you. And you and probably everybody else remembers, you have report card night. It's one day or half a day where, kids get out early and parents come to the school and talk to their teachers about report cards. One thing I've done over my career is I said, forget report card night. We're not going to do report card night. What we're going to do is report card weeks. And I ask every teacher, I say, look, every single family wants to know how their child is doing. Every single family may not be able to make it on that Wednesday night at 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock. So what we're going to do is open up a window of 2 weeks, and you schedule with that family the best time that works for them and the time that works for you. And you guys
They
have a
would do it like
conversation about
office
their child.
appointment. They would do it like it's like a professor that says, "I'm having office hours Tuesdays and Thursdays between 3 and 6.
Exactly.
You need to schedule." And that way we can.
That's it.
Well,
And
let
you
me
make
do
it
something real
happen.
quick.
And we've had
Joni,
100% of our parents show up because
yeah,
we
if you open it up,
accommodated for them.
I can see how.
And before that, there was less than 15% were showing
But
up.
the scary part is that seems like such a simple solution. Yet why didn't we figure that out before? That seems like it seems like something someone somewhere would have said. What if we just? I don't know, but I'm not a teacher. But I feel like I didn't want to insult an actual teacher by asking why wasn't that thought of before, because I know what it's like to have someone look at your career and say you should do it this way, and you're like, well, you've never done my job.
Right.
Let's do this though. Dear Sister Joni M said, "I would love to hear Kai's take on how he gets parents involved. Also, what role does counseling play or mental health solutions play in the schools that he's involved in?" And I also want to say this, Joni, as someone who knows what it's like to stand and teach, do you want to jump upstairs and come up to the big house with us while he's there?
So you want me to start answering some of that, or you were talking to Joni?
Go ahead.
So I guess I'll talk about the counseling piece first. Number one, my personal opinion, my first hire when I started my school, everybody was looking for math teachers and reading teachers. The first person I hired was a social worker. And I strategically went after a social worker because I said, you know what? All of the issues, all of the concerns, all of the happenings in the community that I was serving are they're going to be in my building. And I need to know how to handle these scenarios, and I need somebody that's a professional to address that. So I started looking at social workers and counselors being a vital part of any school staffing. So uh, every child has access to a counselor. Even in this time of closure, our counselor does, Zoom or what is it, StreamYard. They're online with their kids doing video conferencing. Anything that we provide to general ed student, we provide to children who have a special education track and system. So if a child has an IEP, an individualized education plan, if they have speech services, counseling services, any of that mandated on their file, we had to find a way to provide this now virtually as well. And so our commitment to those children, I believe, is what will make our schools better. Because when we really dig down to it, and you start thinking about everybody you start thinking about everybody in every profession, not just in education, every profession, anybody think about your family. That's probably the best place to start because you know more about your family. Think about everybody in your family and all the issues that they have, right? They may be successful in one area and got, they may be a major, business woman or man and have a successful organization and have issues in their family life at home with their spouse, or they may have a addiction problem, or they might have a depression problem, or they might have, there's just tons of issues that all of us deal with and grapple with as individual human beings. So why wouldn't we think that every single child in the building is dealing with something also, right? It could be the loss of a parent or a loved one. They could be a great student and not be on our radar because they're doing well academically. And, maybe grandma passed away a year ago and they're just deeply saddened and are living with this, so we look at our approach to educating is that every single child needs an individual plan and needs individual attention.
Wait,
And like you talked,
I thought, because you said IEP, correct?
an IEP is a
Okay.
individual education plan that's mandated for children that need special services.
Okay,
because of their struggle.
I thought that was only for children that had been recognized as, and I'm using my verbiage carefully here, children who had been recognized as needing extra attention.
Right, and that is the name.
And so you're saying,
what I'm saying is every kid should have that approach, where they might not have that formal document. That should be our approach to when we're creating schools and creating school experiences, that every child should be thought of in an individual way.
Now,
because where you might get engaged and excited about school because of computers, someone else might get engaged and excited about school because of piano. Someone else might get engaged because of the school play. So we have to provide.
I think I might be, listen, this is either one of the most brilliant things I'm going to say this morning, or I might just be an idiot looking for faces in the cloud. When you said everybody needs their own individual program, could we be going to the single unifying theory? Hold on a second. Let's go back to your website here, Vision Academy. I'm scrolling down. I see all these beautiful Black faces. Could this be part of the single unifying theory that all Black people need counseling, no matter how successful, unsuccessful, or where in life you are?
Bingo.
Wow. I feel so
That's exactly what I was saying.
I feel so smart this morning for recognizing that.
We all need it. And people think, oh, you have problems, so now you got to go and get a counselor, and you're not getting along with your wife or your husband. Now you got to get a counselor. What I found, so I was an athlete, a Division I and Olympic development athlete, right? And I remember my coach saying to me, "You're going to go see the psychiatrist, the sports psychiatrist." And I said, "The sports psychiatrist? What for? What? Nothing's wrong with me." And he said, "No, nothing's wrong with you." He said, "But when you go see the sports psychologist, when you see the sports psychologist, hopefully the conversations you're having with this psychologist are going to tap areas of your performance that you haven't even touched yet. and think of the athlete you can become when you are able to open and unleash the, the power of your mental ability as well. And I said, oh my gosh. So I dug down into, counseling or sessions with this psychologist, and my athletic performance got better. And so again, people wait until there's a problem and say, "Oh, I need counseling." If you get married, the first thing you should do is get counseling and try to figure out, how you're going to do this thing. You get a new job, they call it onboarding. That's counseling, right?
We had a
Onboarding,
comment
counseling.
earlier that I want to get back to real quick though, because Reigning Woman said, now where did she go? She said, I'm not a fan of their educational pass-fail proposal because I don't know if we ever got from you whether or not you thought personally, just as Kai, this is a good idea. But here's how she broke it down for us.
Sure.
She said, a child can turn things around for better or for worse during the school year. So to assume that students are carrying on the same efforts in absence, I prefer they all be held back and make everybody do a do-over, which I can see the complexity of both sides.
So I can see the complexity, and I can see why someone would think that. And I'm not saying I don't think that, because I've been struggling with this. I don't know what I think, but what I feel is that it's an opportunity for us to rethink schools. It's an opportunity for us to fix some things that have been broken. So where I talked about the summer slide earlier, why do we have a summer anyway? Why are our children off for 2.5 months? Does anyone know? I mean, historically speaking, I can tell you they had to go.
I thought it was historically because of people who needed to work on the farms.
Exactly. Well, how many children in Brooklyn and Philly working on the farms?
So
why have we not reinvented school
year? The rotating school year where they go to school for X number of weeks and maybe get a week off to hang out.
Absolutely. I've been thinking more and more about this, right? Why do we have to go to school or work even, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday? Because right now they're telling my daughter who's in kindergarten, well, on Wednesday, do nothing because that's too much screen time. So she only has school Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, right? Because 5 days a week of all this screen time they're suggesting is too much. So why can't we use this? So when we go back to school in September, why is then the 5 days of screen time okay again? You see what I'm saying? So why don't we use this time to rethink what is best for us? Rethink, should we have a 4-day work week? Where'd that come from? We can go back into the history of unions and, why we have a 9 to 5 and a, 5-day work week. But these things are not relevant.
Unions are the reason the children can have the time to go to school and not be stuck in a factory somewhere.
Exactly. And
before I even, excuse me, before I go too far down the line, I want to say good morning, CRU royalty. Thanks for stopping in. I always appreciate it when you take time to hang out with us. We got a couple of comments that I really want to point out because we got some good stuff. Oh, by the way, Art of Becoming More. Good morning, and thanks for showing up. What time is it there? We're dealing with, CRU royalty again. 3/4 of his parents and step-parents are professors, all professionals, and they still have issues going back to that whole how we need to address these things.
We got to address the mental illness. I mean, if you look around now at the mental illness anywhere, I don't care where you go.
Yeah.
I don't care. And this is interesting about this COVID-19. It's affecting anybody and everybody. Nobody cares about what car you drive. They don't care what type of house you're living in. They don't care what type of education you have. Everyone's being affected the same way. Although when you start looking at the numbers of under resource communities, we're now seeing in the United States, especially, that in the Black community, more and more residents are getting positive cases because their inability to social distance or their essentialness of their job, which is bus driving and mail delivery, etc. So they're exposing themselves more because of their life situation, right? They have to, if you're thinking about social distancing and you have a 2-bedroom apartment with 3-4 children, 2 parents, how do you social distance, right? Where you got people on the news saying, hey, my family's upstairs and I'm just bunkered down in the basement, so I can social distance. And they slide me food under the, through the door. Well, that's not everybody's experience, right? So
Have you been a
when
superintendent before, by the way? Julian said you'd be a great superintendent, but I don't know what the qualifications for that are. Have you done that job as well?
So I've done it in the charter world. I haven't done it I don't have my superintendent endorsement. I thought about it, and some of my mentors have encouraged me to go that route. I've stayed away from it partially because there's a huge political nature to it that I just wanted to steer away from. But it's something I've considered, and during my time in Brazil, I'm only back in the USA for now 2 years. So I wanted to get back into the trenches. I wanted to get back into, the day-to-day school trenches and see what has changed, what has remained the same, and so to speak, sharpen up my tools before I decide, what's next. But in the charter world, my title as CEO or executive director is equivalent to what some may call a superintendent in a small district.
This is what's lost as children move through the education system in high quality early childhood programs. We tailor learning to the styles and needs of each child. Yeah, I can see that. So let me back up.
This is absolutely what's lost. But go ahead, back up.
You said that you wanted to rethink the 9-month school year. My first question to you is, do you think we should hold everyone back, or should we just let everybody go based on whatever their last grades were? Personally,
so
just you. Not for your school,
yeah,
just you.
Yeah, so just me personally, I think that we have to move forward. They should go on. And I even think the children who were in danger of failing should go on, because their failure was not theirs alone. Their failure is partially on the failure of the system and the community of educators around them, including, their families and their parents. I think
wait a minute. But they're still going to be. If they were failing then, they're not going to magically catch up. If they weren't, they didn't have the systems in place to go forward. I mean, that seems like you're setting them up for an even bigger failure.
Okay, but so if they didn't have the system in place then, them doing it over is going to do what? They're going to fail again. And what happens is the children do a little bit better the second time around, and you can't fail them twice in a row. So then they just send them on anyway, and they're still not ready. Because why do I have a 6th or 7th grader who's failing? Why is a 6th or 7th grader failing? Because that means they're missing something from 1st, 2nd, or 3rd grade, right? But they've been passed on. And they've been passed on, and they've been passed on. And even children who have failed once, most people are not going to fail them twice, because they'll start to think about their age. I mean, I have, there's policies that say, hey, if a kid is a certain height and a certain weight, don't fail them, because it'll be developmentally awkward for them to be, 6 foot tall in the 5th grade. Right? So my point is, pass them on, fix the system, fix what's wrong. Why are they failing? What services are not there? What services are not being provided for this kid? You asked the question, hey, you're not waiting till March to interfere with this kid and let them know that they're failing. Well, in some places they are. Some places they don't even find out they're failing until June, to the end of the school year. But if I get a child and I know that they failed the year before, why am I waiting even one day once the new year starts to add some additional supports to their experience? Just doing it over again is not going to make them better at it. Right? Maybe they get slightly better, but they're not going to get to the point where they've mastered it. If they're one of those, children who, I have kids literally I've seen in my career in 6th and 7th and 8th grade that cannot write their names. I'm not going to catch up what they need to learn to catch up in a year. It's not going to happen. Not even in 2 years.
You said children in that grade that cannot read or write their own name. I heard something once from some teachers, and I want your opinion on it. Tell me if this is just an urban myth or if it's true, and then I'll go into why it struck home for me. They said that if a child, they said you learn how to read from birth to the age of 9, or I think that's 3rd grade, but from the age of 9 to 3rd grade on, you read in order to learn. So what that means is the first 9 years you learn how to read, and even though you continue to learn how to read, from the age of 9 on, you use what you've learned to learn more. And that if at 9 you are not at par, at the adequate reading level, that you will
Forget about it.
never catch up.
Yeah, I've heard that theory that, you know, once you hit 3rd grade, if you don't have it, you're never going to catch up. And so this is why by 4th, 5th grade, you'll have, you know, probably one of the highest points where children are dropping out. 5th, and that's why we started the school. When I started my school in Brooklyn, and we started in 5th grade. 5th, 6th grade is when the first time where kids start thinking about dropping out because of what you just said. They can't function. So they're frustrated. So they say, well, why the hell am I going to do this? And this is also the age where gangs start recruiting heavily. So gangs are recruiting heavily around 10 years old. And that's when kids are beginning to get frustrated with school. And they're coming in. You know, I literally had kids coming into 5th grade on kindergarten and 1st grade reading, writing, and math levels.
Can you say that again about the target time gangs start recruiting? Give it to them again. I don't think
I'm gonna give it to you. I'm gonna give it to you. I'm gonna give it to you again. I'm gonna give it to you again, and I'm gonna give you a quick anecdote story. So I'm in New York. I'm recruiting for my school, trying to find kids for my first class, and I'm all in, you know, going through the public housing, and people thought I was undercover cop. They didn't know what I was, right? And a guy comes up to me and he's like, you know, what you doing, man? What you doing around here? And I said, well, look, you know, I'm starting a school, blah blah blah. And he said to me, he was a member of a it was a heavy Bloods and Crip gang area, and this guy was, you know, affiliated somehow. And he said, well, you know, good luck with your recruiting. He said, I bet you we get more than you get. Right? That's what he told me. And I'm like, what? You know, I'm kind of blown away. And interesting, years later, this same guy's younger, I believe it was his niece. I think it was his niece, might have been his cousin, but I think it was his niece. His niece ended up in my school. And when his niece ended up in my school, let's just say my children had no problems in the neighborhood walking home and you know, being part of a system that was, I won't say against gangs, but was a competition for recruiting students. So that age, 10, 11, 12, is when children are beginning to get really frustrated with school, because if they don't have the reading and writing skills, like you mentioned, and they can't read to learn, they're going to get very frustrated and give up and quit. And if there aren't systems to capture them and engage them to continue on, what do they go do? You know, they disengage in class, and then they'll find something else. So you know, gangs know this. They know that they if you wait till they're 15, you're not going to convince a kid who wants to be an architect at 15 to come join a gang, right? Because they're stuck on being an architect. But at 10, kids are like, you know, what do you want to do with your life? They don't know, right? They want to go to the NBA and the NFL and be a doctor or a lawyer. Those are your top 4 answers on the board. They're just saying that because somebody said that to them.
As someone who didn't grow up in that world, that 10 years old is the target area for recruitment. Like that just blows my mind that that's a true thing. You know, and I'll tell you why I asked that question. One, somehow in my YouTube feed, because I don't know, there is a man who was a notorious drug dealer by the name of Freeway Rick Ross, and he was being interviewed. And in his interview, he said he read about a story where someone chronicled all the dead black men that had been murdered in 1 year in, I don't know if it was Los Angeles or Chicago, but he said the researcher found a mind-blowing statistic that 100% of the men who had been killed did not have a high school education. They did not have a high school diploma. And what he explained to the researcher, he said, to the interviewer, he said, it's not that having a high school diploma stops you from being a criminal or in a world where you may get killed over gangs or drugs. He said that when you have a certain level of education, you may be able to either think or talk your way out of the situation you're in because you have enough vocabulary to say to someone, don't kill me because I can give you money. Or here is the explanation of why these things went wrong. But when you don't even have that much vocabulary and education, you can't even talk yourself out of a bad situation. And it made my mind explode.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that as a big trigger for folks. You know, the more education you have, you know, even if you think about it as an adult, when someone approaches you with a pyramid scam, scheme or something. You look at them and you say, come on, man, get out of my face with that. Right. Because you've had that experience. And so if I'm 10 years old, what experiences have you had really outside of school? And in school is so frustrating. And you got somebody over here saying, hey, you know, life can be so much better. Life can be so much better with us, and also around this age developmentally is when children are shifting from wanting to please their parents to wanting to please their peers, right? So if you get a kindergarten, first, second, third grader, they're interested in pleasing their teachers and their parents, right? That's what makes them, they got their sticker on their paper and they are just thrilled. They made mommy and daddy happy and their teachers happy. That's what life's about. Around fourth grade and fifth grade, going into sixth, the interest is different. You want to now dress a certain way so that your peers recognize you. You want to be the cool kid or the funny kid in class, not necessarily the smart kid, right? That's answering all the questions. And that's when teacher's pet, the term teacher's pet might start coming out around fifth grade. So your interest level is now leaving the school building anyway. Developmentally, kids are shifting towards, I want to please my peers. So again, going back to one of our first comments in this conversation, engagement. It's about engagement. What are we doing with kids at 10 years old that's going to make them say, the hell with a gang or anything else? This is where I need to be. But also, how can you make it such an inviting experience that if I can't read, I'm not singled out and ridiculed and made fun of, to the point where I don't want to be here. Right?
I'll give you one of the reasons that I even asked that is because something that I didn't talk to I remember talking to when I first graduated my first university degree, my mother had a conversation with me that I had to verify with my father because I wasn't quite, they talk about how proud we are of you and things like that. But here's what got me. I didn't know this, but I had a really good conspiracy on my team. My parents told me a couple of things I didn't know. And by this time, they were divorced, and my dad moved around the corner. They were still, I didn't even know that I had friends who, when their parents got divorced, said horrible things about each other. I'm sure my parents were angry at each other for certain things. I'd never heard or seen either of my parents behaving or saying something negative towards the other one because they said they made a decision before they even got married. I was the most important, which was a big thing. But my mom told me that something I never realized that I'm only starting to now see, she made sure I could read 3 grade levels ahead from birth. My first memories with my mother were her reading a word and then me repeating the word. I don't know how old I was before I was in school. Then my father was giving me books that, to some people, this might be the greatest dad in the year or slightly irresponsible. My father was giving me books that were so far ahead of me, I was struggling, and I always felt like I wasn't quite getting it. I remember being in junior high school reading Soul on Ice by Eldridge Cleaver. I remember reading the Iliad, and I'm like, this is not fun. But what I didn't catch on to is that by forcing me there, I was so much farther ahead of everybody else that by the time I got into junior high school, I remember realizing at a certain point, I'm not smart. Like, I used to think I was smart. My ego, a man only has one problem, that's his ego. I didn't realize I wasn't smart, but my ability to read meant that I could just figure shit out. When I realized what styles of writings were, I could look at an exam that a teacher wrote and, because of the way the teacher spoke, tell you what the correct answer was, because it's very difficult to write incorrectly. It's very difficult to write it's very difficult to write down something that is not true in your own hand. I credit my grandmother with that, who was 65 when I was born, who was a public speaker in a different life. And she taught me public speaking. She taught me how to stand in front of a crowd. I don't know if anybody knows, I have a speech impediment. I have a lisp. And when I grew up, it was bad up until a certain point when my grandmother would stand me in front of a window and make me repeat and recite prose, poetry, enter speaking competitions until I could speak in front of a crowd with perfect diction. I didn't know it took that much to get one successful kid. Just me. I'm an only child. Just me. And I think about all my friends and cousins who were had just as much potential as I did, but didn't have that support system. And I'm thinking, wow.
So let me throw this at you, right? Because you're a guy that lives abroad and lives in a country where English is not the language of the country. So imagine, or remember when you first showed up into Brazil, and I remember distinctly, the first thing you need to be able to do is be able to read and speak Portuguese, or you're done. You're dead in the water. You're dead in the water. You can't order food. You can't do a lot of things. So imagine a child in the United States of America, 10 years old, that cannot communicate reading, writing, and speaking effectively. You start to feel lost, like you're in a foreign country.
Well, I'll also tell you this is one of the things that this time in quarantine has done. I tell people all the time that, when you come out of quarantine, there are a lot of people saying, don't worry about it. It's no pressure. I like pressure. I like that feeling of, hey, what am I going to get done? And I did a video call. Oh, not that one. Where'd it go? I did a video the other day, not Homeschool Havoc. I did one called Hustling Portuguese Backwards in Brazil. And I went into what it's like, what it's like relearning, I'll say. Is that it? No, that's not it. Where'd it go? What it's like relearning the Portuguese language from the beginning again. And I'm not here, by the way, I am not fluent. I want to be clear to anyone listening. YusefWateef, does not claim to be fluent at all. But what I can tell you is that whole difference of learning and relearning that language that you're going to need is that's not it. How come I can't find it? But learning and relearning the language that you need, it makes a big, big difference. It makes a big difference.
It makes a huge difference. It makes the difference.
It makes the difference. It makes the difference to be able to speak and communicate in the language that you have adopted, because it matters. I mean, it really matters. I mean,
and so that's the only opportunity as an adult where you're going to feel what it feels like to be a kid, in class that cannot keep up with the language and what's going on in the classroom, right? And the frustration. I mean, I know people that got to Brazil, couldn't pick up the language, and left. They said, I can't do this. I cannot do this. I can't order food. I can't blah, blah, blah. I can't function. Can't pay my light bill. They just couldn't function. So imagine a child. And so it goes back to, I think, somebody's question about parent engagement. Imagine a parent who didn't finish school, who now has a kid who's in school, and the teachers and the principal are calling you in to talk about your child experience at school, and you don't feel comfortable with your communication of the English language and grasp of the English language to even go into the school. Parents are sometimes embarrassed. They don't, I'm sorry, I don't know the word for this or for that, and they don't understand the words that are even on their child's report card to ask the question. And we're not even talking about English language learners and people that are, their parents aren't even from this country, aren't from the U.S. So parents are coming in really apprehensive a lot of times. And so I do want to answer that question that was asked earlier. Again, my approach has always been, what I think works is that we go to the parents, we meet them where they are. We translate all of our materials into the languages of the families who attend the school. We have parents and community members on staff at the school. Our school security, our school has a lot of children from West Africa and a lot of different dialects from Western Africa, as an area in Philadelphia where a lot of them have immigrated to. And so when parents get to the school, the first person they encounter sometimes is the school security guard. And he can speak all of their languages.
For a quick second, because I got to play advocate for the other team. When we talk about all these things about translating into native language, I understand in theory what you're talking about, but because I have so many friends that are rank and file grunt level teachers that are already pouring 12, 15 hours a day into a school system that pays them less than they would make. Arguably, a manager at Starbucks in some cities makes more than your average school teacher. Nothing against Starbucks. But what I'm saying to you is, now are we asking people who are already going above and beyond, who are already digging into their own pockets, who are already sacrificing time away from their own family? Now we've got to say, if you have a mixed classroom full of children from different areas, on top of that, we're going to ask you to make sure their parents can understand things that are written in, and I'm not trying to get nationalistic on you, but written in the language of the country they chose to go inside. Wouldn't that be the same level of arrogance as me coming to Brazil as a foreigner and being angry because the menu where I want to go grab a steak isn't written in English? Like, how does that make sense?
I wish some people in the comments could join for this answer, but I think our job as educators is to teach. And so because that is our job, we have to pull out all the stops. And if we have an issue and we know that, teacher pay has been an issue, facilities for teachers and resources has been an issue, there are tons of issues. But we can't stop and say, well, because of these issues, we're not going to do what we know is right. And we're not going to give these children what we could give them. So it's not just on the teacher, it's on the administrators, on the school leaders, it's on the community members, it's on the local politicians, it's on everybody. And part of the problem is that everybody's not working together to solve these problems. But if you have an area where, like you mentioned, in Brazil, for example, I lived in Rio de Janeiro and in Zona Sul. And in Zona Sul, you're going to have your highest population of English speakers in that area. And if you go to any restaurant now in that area, I bet you can get probably 80 to 90% of them, you can get a menu in English. Why? Because when they got the World Cup and the Olympic bid, these restaurants and these businesses said, look, if we're going to get the business that we want, we're going to have to provide for the people who are coming. And that's the same thing in the school. If we're going to be successful teaching and educating and communicating and building relationships with these families, we might not have to have these menus in English forever, but there has to be a period where the families come and they say, okay, I trust this place and I can learn and grow to trust this place because they at least recognize that I'm coming from a different place. And I
agree with what you just said, but it's just a matter of, at the end of the day, what you're saying is correct on a technical level, but we're flogging these teachers to death. And I'll tell you what ends up happening. And I actually have something I want to show everybody to illustrate my example. I'm going to show everybody something real quick. A lot of people here know I use Patreon because Patreon is where I've been putting a lot of the content that's highly technical about some of the things that have brought me success and my clients' success. I did a 3-person chat. It was called High Salary Teaching, right? And I brought in one of my Patreon supporters for a one-on-one coaching salary with a high salary international teacher. And they went into detail about the classes. And essentially, this teacher sat down with one of the other Patreon supporters I have and mapped out over the course of 45 minutes exactly how in 6 months to go from someone who had a bachelor's or higher degree in the United States, and in 6 months do one course that's 4 months and another course that's like 2, and in 6 months be adequately and appropriately credentialed to teach internationally. Why is that important? Because you can go to an international school anywhere in the world as someone who has a bachelor's or higher degree from the United States, plus this certification, and earn an extraordinary salary in a classroom full of students who are adequately prepared, all the books you need, 20 students in a class. So now we have this brain drain, which I've seen a lot in the Black community with a lot of Black teachers. They're like, you know what? To hell with this. Why not just take my education, get an extra certification to teach internationally, and go off to the United Arab Emirates, Brazil, China, and work in an international school where I can work a regular job, regular hours, be paid extraordinarily well with all expenses paid, instead of staying in the American school system where I'm going to be expected not only to teach, but to pay for materials out of my own pocket, translate those materials into other languages for the parents of children. And that's something that I've seen I've seen that happening so much now. And I want to be clear. I have people who come to me for those connections now.
So I'm going to just say one thing here. That's great. That's fine. You can do that, and you can even do that without leaving the United States. Again, my calling has been to serve the families and the communities that have been forgotten and are under resourced and don't get what they deserve, right? So if I wanted, and I've, I dibbled and dabbled a little bit in the private schools in the Brazil system, and have a bit of an understanding of what that's like. But in a public school setting, in a community like I mentioned earlier, that is just considered underserved and high poverty, that's more than you're a teacher. It's a calling of service, right? And so I'm not fulfilled if I go to a school and the kids have everything, and I can work from 8 to 3 or whatever it is and go home and sleep and not have to worry about them to the next day. That, they have what they need because of their family structure. I've worked in schools where I see the gap that's created in adults, right? So then when we start talking again about, where do we want to see these children in 20 years? We all see them now walking the streets, right? And we see them incarcerated. We see them uneducated. We see them and we get frustrated and we say, well, how did this happen? It happened because of the injustices in the school system. They weren't provided the same opportunities and the same resources. So I want to work in schools where that is the case and help fill the gap. And the way you fill the gap is you have to create schools that families trust, because schools in urban areas, again, I'm speaking mostly about the United States, the schools in these areas, there's a level of distrust that's there that doesn't allow for communication and relationships to be built. So you have to start, number one, with building the relationships and getting the parents engaged. And once you, and if you say to them, look, again, I remember when I was in Brazil and I went to a restaurant and they said, hey, we don't have an English menu. And guess what? I left because I needed to know what I was eating that day. And my Portuguese was not to the point where I could figure it out. And I left and I went to another restaurant that had it. And parents don't have that luxury to say, well, this school's not giving my kid what they need. I'm going to leave and I'm going to go to another school, because all the schools around them are failing. So they tend to just start to give up and say, well, you know what? This is what it is, and that's just the end of it. But the teachers who teach in these settings, the leaders that lead in these settings, have to understand and do understand, I think, that it's going to take more. It is going to take money out your pocket. It's going to take time out of your day. Our school went from 7 o'clock in the morning to 5 o'clock in New York City. And after school was from 5 to 7. So we had the kids from 7 to 7. And people looked at us like we were crazy. But I also created a budget where I had teachers making $100,000 in New York City, right? In 2005, 6, 7, 8. So it has to be a group effort. It has to be politicians involved, community members involved, parents involved, teachers involved, and people that understand this can't be, like a model that you're getting from a private school or a suburban school. Just like you asked earlier, should we just fail them all and make them do it again? No, we should fix it. We should fix it. We should fix it and make the schooling experience that they have next year adjust to what happened this year. And that should be what happens every year.
You just said you had teachers that were making $100,000 a year, right? Of course, they're going to go the extra mile if they're compensated adequately, right?
Absolutely.
Now, that's the thing. So
and that's part of the leadership. That's part of the leadership's job to figure out how to pay your professionals. And this is why the charter school movement has popped up in our country. And what I was trying to share with, when I was in Brazil, the autonomy that I have around my budget, the autonomy that I have around my program allows me to pay and to give incentives to teachers that weren't normal. We used to take our teachers on trips to, I'm moving my location. We went on trips to Puerto Rico and the Bahamas for end of the year professional development for teachers.
Now, wait a minute. This is a private school, though, right? This is a
public school. Public school. Charter schools are public schools that are privately run. And when I say privately run,
about a charter school, though?
Board.
You're talking about a charter school, though, right?
I'm talking about charter schools, but they're
Okay,
public
so we
schools.
are not
Children
talking
don't pay
about
a
your
dime.
rank and file teachers that most children are going to get.
No, well, yes and no. Yes and no, because they're coming from the same pool. But one argument with charter schools is that you're going to get highly motivated staff and highly motivated families to attend these schools. So you're going to get the staff that go above and beyond, because as a charter school leader, I have the ability to hire and terminate anybody at any time. Where in a traditional public school setting, you're not going to have that liberty. So there's more of a big.
Uh-oh. Brother Kai, okay, you're back. You know what? Let me do something real quick. I want to say thank you to CRU Royalty. And he said, I'm spreading the stimulus. He just joined my Patreon. He also sent a PayPal, and I appreciate that. And I appreciate everyone who has really been supporting our growth. You'll also get a private message from me, CRU, with my number in it, because I also want to hear from you any suggestions you have, because I listen to everybody who supports me on other things that we can do. But I want to let you know that I appreciate you publicly and openly supporting the content that we're bringing forward. Uh-oh, I hope that doesn't mean you're abandoning us. You got to go. You got something grown up to do, like work. Yeah, she said, talk to you later. Oh, and for the record, what CRU was talking about, and I want to show everybody this real quick. I have let's see. This is my Patreon, and I posted it in the chat. A lot of the things that I've been posting on YouTube, I would get private emails, private phone calls about, and I was giving out all the information I have, and a lot of people weren't really capitalizing on it. So I had to really focus on the people who wanted the benefit of the years I spent as a financial professional, the things I know about cryptocurrency, the life of living in 15 countries and how to become an international person, down to technical aspects of growth and professionalism that have helped me, and I did this. So I'm not going to make everybody read these things. What I will say is click on the link that's in the description and check it out. These are the things that I do and how I do them and the people that I do them with. If you have any questions about it, let me know. But this is the goods. This is what I've really graduated into dealing with. Let's see. There we go. You've changed locations like 4 times. Is the sun coming up and getting in your face or something?
Yeah, the sun is. I got out here. It was 7:15. It's now 9, and I don't want to mess your video up too badly. So
I appreciate.
I just switched up to the upper deck.
So, are you gonna do are you doing Corona beard? Because I want you know, I've had this before.
I am.
Corona. Are you gonna grow a full one in?
I'm just letting it grow till it's over. I haven't touched the thing.
I have
I'm trying to keep it professional, but
I've got a buddy of mine in Colombia that normally comes on YouTube, and he has his own channel. He chats with us. And I said, hey, why don't you come and chat with me tomorrow night? I'm going to do a video on some stuff. And he says, I can't. And I said, well, why not? Is your internet connection down? He said, no, I haven't had a chance to get to my barber because of the closure. And I said, you can't figure out how to
couldn't figure it out.
Figure out how to, because my barber is been closed. You know, you can't go to a barber shop during and I had to figure out on my own, how to get this done the right way with Magic Shave, not even a razor. And it's like,
yeah, it's tough. And I'm the type of person that, probably once a week I'm in the barbershop, at least getting the shape up.
Yeah, well, here's the
thing. People are looking at me like, what?
Because here's the thing. If you work on every week figuring it out yourself, even if you make a mistake right before you go back to professional life every day, you can just shave it off. I mean, we're men. There's not going to be a situation you shave it off.
Right.
Women, however, I know some women. I sympathize with the women because they can't just go crazy and figure it out next week. When they do it, they've got to commit.
Gotta commit.
He said he did a Corona shave. Oh,
yeah,
okay,
man.
there. His dad had a barbershop for 30 years, so he knows how to do it himself. There you go.
And we're learning a lot of things about doing things ourselves during this time. And I think our world is going to be changed forever, at least our mindsets. I know people have short memories, but I hope that a lot of the lessons that we're learning right now will continue and influence the way that we do school, the way that we do life, the way that we, take care of each other. As I mentioned earlier, this is, a novel situation where it's affecting anybody and everybody, no matter your degrees, no matter your background or the car you drive. So for one of the first times, you're seeing people care on a level that you haven't seen before. And the fact that within 2 weeks, I mean, not even 2 weeks, within 10 days, we were able to get funding, get computers for every single kid, make sure every kid was safe and had food for their families. I mean, we were providing for families, and school districts around the country and around the world are providing for their families things that they've gone without for so long. And we can take this argument to every industry, right? Healthcare, and healthcare is being provided for free in different places, and unemployed are getting stimulus checks, and the under employed families are getting resources. So if countries that were able to do this, we have to think, well, why weren't they doing this in the first place?
Hey, listen, don't get me started on this whole stimulus check thing, because, again, first of all, it's not a gift. It's not a bonus they're giving you. They're taking this away from you next year. 1,200 is an insult. 1,200 in Philadelphia is not going to. What is 1,200 going? You are a man with a family. What is 1,200 going to do for you in Philadelphia?
Groceries. Yeah, I might have groceries for a few weeks. That's about it.
Yeah, not even a whole month. You're not going to feed a whole family for that in a whole month. I tell people, this is what's interesting. And this goes back to a conversation I had on my channel about doing things the right way, so to speak. Did you know that as a small business owner, I have my business registered in Brazil because I didn't want to do the whole working off the books and hiding from the government, and everybody, oh, you can do this, you can get away with that. Or in Portuguese, they say jeitinho brasileiro. I wasn't for that, right? Because my business is registered, do you know I still get the Brazilian stimulus?
Oh, wow.
Now, here's the interesting part. Brazil is giving 600 real, right? Now, if you transfer that into American dollars, it's almost nothing. But did you know that 600 real in Brazil goes farther than the 1,200 in America?
Well, right. Exactly. Well, it depends on where you are in America. I mean, if you're in Mississippi or, some parts of the South, 1,200, might pay your rent and your groceries for a while.
12. Well, here's the thing. I got to contact my cousins. And for example, I got cousins in Alabama. I'm going to ask them.
Check Alabama and Memphis. They might be okay with 1,200.
Is anybody here in the American South? Can we say east of Texas and south of, what do you want to call it?
Virginia.
South of Virginia and east of Texas. If anybody here is from there, tell us what 1,200 is going to do for you, because I can tell you, my family up in New York, my family in LA, my buddies in Texas and in Houston. That's not even that 1,200. You might. It's an insult to give it to them, and it's not enough. And say we're going to take that back later. And this is, by the way, how to legally work in Brazil and why. Where I talked about the importance, and this is before the stimulus checks. This was before all that stuff. Now people are finding out the benefits of when you have things done the right way, you might actually get something of it later. But
I want to piggyback that, because I think that is our opportunity right now. We haven't had a stoppage, right? And you think about your own just daily life. Like, when have you had this amount of time to just stop and think and reflect and strategize about how you live your life? So this is giving us an opportunity while we're pressing forward and, people are figuring out new ways to continue business. It's also, I would encourage people to stop and just think about how they've run their businesses, how they've run their lives, and use this time to rethink what's important going forward, right? And so that's what I'm trying to do with the schools that I work with. And we're going to try to rethink things to, to whatever level we can in the time that we have. I'm trying to do that with my family. I'm trying to do that with my own personal life. There's people that talked about, oh, I haven't run this much or worked out this much, ever. Well, why not? Because if you have that desire, you still got the same 24 hours in a day. It's just that we haven't prioritized what's important to us because we've been all running around chasing something else that may or may not be, your priorities. But if your health is your priority, if your family is your priority, you need to create a life where it represents that. It shows that. So when we go back to school, we have to create a school system and model and experience that will account for gaps in education and slides and opportunities to provide, these services for all the children. And it's a, right now, again, it's April. We have until September technically when school starts again. So some people can sit back and twiddle their thumbs and do nothing with this time. And what I've chosen to do is to try to rethink school on a whole nother level and try to think about, this year there's no testing. What does that mean for our kids? There's no state test where they told them that's all that matters.
Oh, you're right. So there's no
state test anymore. So what do you do with a high school senior that needs to take SATs to go to college? You tell them they can't go to college, or you tell them to get a waiver? Now, is that kid going to be less successful or more successful in life?
I hadn't even thought about that. Holy crap.
They're going to just go to college.
If you're at the university and you get a wave of students that all have a waiver, how do you separate the wheat from the chaff?
Exactly.
There's no way.
Exactly. Well, there's no way to do it. And so it begs the question, well, why were you doing it in the first place?
Whoa.
And why should you ever do it again? Wait. Now you're separating kids who have access.
But Brother Kai, there has to be some sort of mechanism to separate the children who accomplished from the ones who didn't. The ones who, as unfair as it is, had a support system to help them succeed, are the ones who didn't. We can't put ourselves in a situation where we just say it's a free-for-all, because one of my biggest motivations was that understanding that if I didn't do well, I would be stuck where I was born. Let me go to something real quick. You said earlier about this whole reset button, something that I tell people that they need to really focus on, and I tell people this all the time. I have told people consistently, don't come out of this fat. Don't be one of those people who, because I'm putting more iron in my diet. I tell people all the time, listen, right now, what did everybody say? Oh, if I had time to cook the right food and exercise every day,
now you got the time.
I could do this and I could do that. Listen, this is what I look like coming in. I'm going to look better coming out. That's not, right. I'm not playing that game. And I say this because, listen, I was a fat kid. I don't know about anybody else, but I'm here to testify. Once I got into college, I was 19 years old. I had 18, 19 years old. I had some friends in the weight room that said, listen, you got the potential to actually put something on. I'm not going back for anybody, for any reason. Disease be damned. I'm not going back. I'm coming back. I'm not playing that game about, I'm going to come out of here weighing a lot more. I'm done. Listen, I let myself have a couple orders in. I let myself have a couple pizza. I let myself have a couple fried chicken meals. Now I'm not, No. Hey, good morning, BK. Good morning, BK. Thanks for showing up. Like, share, subscribe. But now going back to what you said,
I think it's go ahead.
No, going back to what you said about, there has to be a filtering mechanism. There has to be some way to say these kids got it and these kids unfortunately didn't. There's got to be some way to do this.
Sure, we can have that, but then you have to figure out why these kids don't. The ones that didn't get it, you got to figure out why they're not getting it. And you got to see if it's a playing field is level. A lot of them don't get it because they didn't even know they had to get it. They didn't even know there was something to get.
But can you give me a situation anywhere in history where the playing field was level for anybody, especially Black people?
Well,
the game is rigged, right? The game is rigged. We know that, right?
The game is rigged.
So we know the game is rigged. We can't pretend like the game doesn't exist. We can't just say, well, I want to throw the game away. I mean, I think one of the biggest advantages I had was I was taught from a very young age, help isn't coming, especially if you're Black. I was taught very early, it's not fair. You can cry about it, or you can simply get better and have more. But there is no, there was no participation trophy when I was coming up.
Sure. And it probably shouldn't be. But again, I think my what I'm advocating for right now is it is an opportunity to reset. Just like you said on the fitness thing or whatever it may be, it's an opportunity to reset schools. And if we're going to do this year with the waiver, nobody's taking tests, nobody's taking, placement exams, nobody's, finishing their year. but they're going to continue on, and they're going to these high school seniors are going to go to college. They're going to end up in college, and they're going to be the only ones in the history of time that entered college without finishing high school in a traditional way. And those kids are probably going to be okay. And so if they're going to be okay, then we have to ask ourselves, what are we doing anyway with these requirements? And are these requirements that are going to predict their success, or are they requirements that are going to predict their access?
Well, Joni said SATs have never been about who gets it, just my opinion. Joni, can you go into that? Can you hammer out a little bit more on why that is? And Don Bryant says equity in education is important.
So, yeah, I'm being curious. I don't know what she means by SATs are about who have never been about who gets.
That's why I'm asking. Joni, can you bang on your keyboard a little bit and give me some more detail on what you mean?
I mean, I think I agree with her. They're definitely not about who gets it. They're about who gets to take it. Who gets to take it and who's prepared to take it. Because if that's, and if you think about it, and I know you just made a play for the test, and that should exist in some shape or form, but a lot of schools have lifted that requirement. And we're talking schools like Harvard and Yale and Princeton. They don't look at your SAT scores any longer. And to Don's point,
something for people when we talk about equality and equity, I want to illustrate a point, and I think, let's see. I think this is something that a lot of people have seen, but I want to share it anyway. There. Equality versus equity. That picture illustrates equality means, sure, everybody gets the same thing. Equity means everybody gets to see the same thing and have the same opportunity to enjoy the game of life, if I can go overboard and, beat these analogies to death.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great picture. And we're definitely more to the left right now.
Now,
equity is not there.
She said, you're talking about students who get it and those who don't, but SATs tell more about who has access to tech prep and can afford to take it. You know what?
Exactly. Well,
I think
I agree with her 100%.
Who run test prep facilities for SATs and they make a considerable amount of money.
Let me tell you something. I'm connected to an organization. I have a friend that started an organization. Very simple. We went to Georgetown University together. She comes from a very wealthy background, and she was home after graduating, and a family friend, said to her parents, "Hey, your daughter went to Georgetown. Can she help our kid get into Georgetown or a school like that?" She created a business years ago around helping the elite, and I mean the elite, get their children into schools, because they're not necessarily smarter. They're just better connected and better resourced. So they pay anywhere from $25,000 to $75,000 for packages per year to this organization to provide them test prep and college prep, and they will help them with their essays, etc., so that they get into a tier 1 school. There's no one I grew up with that's paying $75,000 to get into a Harvard, Yale, or Georgetown, or anywhere else. Nobody.
Well, watch this. BK from the Rockies said, unless colleges and universities are willing to invest time to help kids get up to par for higher education, the current crop of new students will have deficient folks for higher education, unfortunately. I don't know if the colleges and universities have a vested interest in helping the kids in high school be smart enough to get there when they know they can depend on the private sector to do it for them.
Right. There's no need.
Let me give you my own complicit behavior,
no need.
as because I want to be upfront about it. Let me give you something that just blew up like a light bulb in my mind. Watch this. And I show this all the time, but I'll show it in a different context. I tell everybody, well, what do? connect with me on LinkedIn. I do writing, ghost writing. I edit papers. I edit books for corrected university level English. Right now, my career has blown up doing just resume writing. People who come to me and say, I need a professional level resume. Right now, I have a client whose company fired 25% of its staff. The remaining 75% had to agree to a 15% pay cut. People coming to me from all over the world saying, I need a university level 1, 3, 5 page. But here's the interesting part. When I was in China, and I tell people, scroll down my resume and don't look at the resume part, because that's not the important bit. The important bit comes down at the, where is it? The important bit comes down at, come on, where is it? Recommendations, because recommendations are where people say, hey, this guy Wateef is legitimately who he claims to be. He's worth the money. He's a professional who can deliver. But here's something that I don't have here that I just realized that I was doing in China. When I lived in Shanghai, one of my side gigs was writing papers for people, Chinese students that were smart enough to get into American universities, but spoke or wrote almost no English. Their families would hire me on the side and pay a considerable amount of coin for me to write their children's entrance thing.
Absolutely.
And it didn't even occur to me, that I'm part of that system, because they were people who had enough money to say, I'm going to give my, now, by the way, I don't know if this system works anymore, because so many universities got fed up with with these Chinese applicants who had these stellar papers coming into their university, and actually, when they asked them about, oh my goodness, you wrote this in such beautiful English, and asked them about their entrance exam and entrance papers, they couldn't speak any English, even though they knew technically the information.
Right. Yeah, and that happens, across the board everywhere. And like whoever said in the chat, it's about who gets access to the prep, who gets access to. I worked with companies in Brazil when I was there who were trying to get kids into USA universities and colleges. And it was simply that. It was what families could pay for it. That was the only difference in the students that we were getting into the program. Who could pay for it, who couldn't. Simple as that. So again, I think because we're in a moment where all of the things that we were told are important for us to move forward have been stripped away from us. We can't tell these kids, well, your waiver means nothing and your year means nothing. So they're going to continue on, and they're going to be fine, and they're going to do well. And so some people are going to raise the flag and say, wait a minute, I just paid for a tuition of college that I took online. Why should I ever come back to campus again? If you're saying this is okay and you charge me for it, full tuition or whatever, why should I ever come back to campus again? I can do virtual learning for the rest of my college career. I can go to college without taking an SAT. I'm not hearing you for some reason.
Let me see if I can post this. I just got a message, and I'm going to see if I can get this to post, because it's behind what may be a blocked site on Forbes.com. But here we go. Forbes magazine, and I'll post the link here. This was sent to me privately, so I don't know if I can identify the sender unless they want to in the comments. Look at this.
Exactly.
Proposed 2,000 monthly stimulus checks and canceled rent and mortgage payments
for a year.
Proposed $2,000 monthly stimulus checks and canceled rent and mortgage payments for a year. And this is on a Forbes article. Here's the thing. What we're looking at now is universal basic income, but they're hiding it under different names. We are right now dealing with people who don't want to admit that you may need to make sure everyone can, and this is a crazy idea, what happens if people simply don't have to worry about food? They can simply say, listen, I'm going to stay at home and educate my child adequately. But now and this is where conspiracy hat comes on, tinfoil hat put on, and I want you to listen and hear me out on this. My life experience has taught me across several continents and through several situations that it's in no one in power or who is a have instead of a have not. It is never going to be in their best interest for the average person to have more education than necessary to successfully execute a fundamental job and then die shortly after their use has expired. That the people in charge understand that if you can ask too many questions and you don't have to worry about your basic needs, you might start asking questions from your government.
Exactly.
How do we deal with that? How do we deal with knowing it may not be in everyone's best interest who's in power for you to have too much information? Because one of the things I've learned, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, a base level of education that gets you just a little bit above the line means you can multiply that effect. But if you're below the line, you'll never get past a certain area. Like I have people who I love, who are cousins, who can't take advantage of the opportunity they have right now.
Can't.
Even those who have a job that says we're going to pay you during this time off, they don't have enough fundamental education to really capitalize on it. Because people say, well, take that stimulus check and start a business. Okay, how?
How? Right. Or invest it into the stock market. How?
Right. I get messages every day about money. How do I start going into cryptocurrency, Wateef? And a lot of my friends get really angry when I say, okay, slow down. How about first, I give you one or two books, and then you read through those books and we talk about some of the concepts involved to help you understand what investing is. Why can't you just tell me where to put my money? Well, first of all, I could, but what if I'm wrong? And what if my style of investment isn't for you? And the worst thing that could happen, what if you make a large short-term gain and then you think investing is easy? Then you just bet the house on a cryptocurrency, a Bitcoin, a basic stock or bond that I use, and now you lose everything and you want to come after me with an axe. Because why not take this time to learn? Why not? But if you're behind the eight ball already, they feel like, well, maybe I don't have to learn.
Right.
It just becomes this vicious cycle.
It's a vicious cycle, but we're already in a vicious cycle. So again, I think it's time that we can hopefully use this time to rethink some of the systems and some of the tools that we're using, and come out of this in a better place. I mean, that's all we can hope for.
Brother Kai, I appreciate the time and attention you've poured into this conversation. I appreciate that you've been able to give a nuanced view to some of these things. I'd like to believe that we got some closure, but I don't know if we opened up more questions than answers.
Yeah, I think there's so much, it's funny, a lot of the staff will ask me, well, how are we going to do grades? Is it going to be pass fail, or, what are we going to do? And a lot of it is we just don't know. We don't know because the main thing that we do not know is we don't know when this virus is going, what this virus is doing to us, and when it's going to, slow down or disappear or stop causing deaths. I mean, you have a president who wants to reopen the country, and the governors are saying no, and schools closed for 2 weeks in this state and open in that state. We're just in a total state of confusion right now. Nobody knows, and so we're just doing the best we can with the information that we have, and we're trying to figure it out. At one point you said, "Oh, don't wear a mask. It doesn't mean anything." Now you got states and cities and countries mandating that you wear a mask. So, what is going to come from this really is going to be a day-to-day, event by event answer to what's coming up, what's coming down the pipe. Right now we're closed in Pennsylvania and most of the U.S., like I said, through May 15th. Well, what if that extends till July 15th or August 15th? What happens to summer school? What if this goes into the fall? Do we just continue virtually? There's just so many questions that are going to arise. So,
oh, hold on. Just when I thought we were safe, by the way, Sid Owsley, great idea. when we say, do we continue virtually? There are a lot of schools who are proud to say, well, listen, we're just going to give all of our students tablets so they can learn at home. Do you know how few children around the world, let's not even just talk about America, how few children around the world have a situation where they have, let's not talk about high-speed internet access that everybody doesn't have, okay?
All right.
What about those children who just don't have a school system that can say, hey, here's a tablet. We're going to have our teachers go online from home, and there you go. Like, how do we even deal with people who don't know that's not an option?
Right. Well, in my school, we got 375 kids. We have 15 families that are not online with us right now. We don't know why. We don't know. We're trying to reach them. We're trying to get in touch with them the best we can. We found out that 2 of them just didn't have internet, didn't know how to get internet, even though the city's giving free internet. They didn't know how to access it, and they still don't. So again, these are some of the problems that are coming up. They're not going to disappear when the virus is gone or a vaccine is gone. You're still going to have families in these same situations. And the reason that they're not engaged with us now is the same reason they weren't engaged with us 4, 5, 6, 7 months ago. And so those are the problems we got to start attacking. We got families that don't eat. We got families that don't have internet and don't have heat and don't have the basic necessities like you're talking about. So, it's awakening people's eyes to say, hey, wait a minute. How can we help these families? How can we help these people in these communities? Pennsylvania is one of the only states that closed their liquor stores, right? Every other state kept them open because they said, well, we can't have a bunch of addicts running around and can't get their fix. All right. What are we going to do with them? We don't want people to start robbing and stealing for alcohol. So they kept them open. State stores and liquor stores are considered essential in every state except for Pennsylvania. But these are some of the, so do you leave that conversation wondering, well, why the hell we got so many people addicted to alcohol? Right? That's what I'm thinking about. I'm not worried about what stores open, what stores closed. I'm thinking, damn, they know that there's so many people that are addicted to alcohol. There's so many people that are going through domestic violence. And now all of a sudden, we have all these solutions that we can throw at the problem. We got to continue to throw solutions at the problem even after this social distancing is lifted, because these problems still exist.
Watch this. If we
needed.
talk about one of the basic problems of just a money problem. I was born in Niagara Falls, New York. When I was in high school, there were 2 main high schools. One was LaSalle Senior High School, where I attended, and the other was called Niagara Falls High School, and it's been consolidated into one. But now get this. This is an article I'm going to share from 2014. As technology goes home, schools work out who pays for repairs. In 2014, students were given iPads, but then parents didn't know. Let's go down here. This year, she found out parents of Williamsville, New York Middle School students assigned devices were given a choice: spend $34 for insurance on the device or assume responsibility for the full $400 cost. Now, think about that for a second. They gave these children pads, which aren't free, right? We know nothing is free. And I'm going to post this article. They said, hold on a second. It wasn't the point of $34. It was the principle. It was the principle that nobody knew this was coming. So now you have children who may not even be able to afford lunch. Some of these children are on the free lunch program, and you're telling their families, we're going to help your kids by giving them these pads to take home to do work, but it's going to cost you
better
even
not
more.
break it.
And now think about that. Think about what happens when you say, by the way, cough up $34 next week, or if this is broken on the way to school, home from school, the dog poops on it. If anything happens, you're on the hook for an additional $400. Are we helping them now? Is this technology really helping?
I've had families hand it back to me, and they say, you know what? I don't want to be responsible for that. You can keep it. You can keep your laptop. You can keep your tablet, because I don't want to be responsible for $400, and I don't have $34. That's a very real thing. And my point is, this was the situation prior to the coronavirus. This is the world that we've been living in. This virus has magnified and put into the forefront of people's minds and on the news these injustices that have been happening all along. And so now we got to deal with them. I think it's a great opportunity and time to deal with them while we're all at home and safe with our families, and time to think and rethink how we do things. I say get off of the Zoom call and do more calls and meetings and thinking about how we go forward in a better way. Because as soon as schools open back up, that same kid that couldn't afford that $34 for that insurance can't afford that $34 for something else that they need. And that's where we got to reach out and meet our families there.
Wow. He said they didn't close liquor stores there. ND, I'm assuming, is North Dakota. Wow, they don't dare close. And then BK from the Rockies said something equally terrifying. He said, believe it or not, liquor stores are where homeless folks buy food sometimes. I've seen a frontline PBS story where that was happening. Yep. BK, can you get me that link? Can you please pop that link into the chat? Because that is, if I want to have a depressing day, I want to watch that. And get this, what you said about this coronavirus and what it's done. I'm going to do an article, a chat, and I'll make sure you're invited as well. This corona exposes everything. This corona is exposing your financial inadequacies. It's exposing your personal inadequacies. I'm dealing with a situation right now that I need to get some distance from a few hours before I actually address it, because dealing out of emotion is never a good thing. It's exposing people's ethical shortcomings. And I'm dealing with an issue right now. I'm gonna talk about it later, about how quarantine exposes your ethics and your behaviors. I just had someone behave in a very unethical professional way. Listen, let's not even get into that. Let's not even get into that. Thank you. Look for it and post it in the comments if you can. As I tried to do 10 minutes ago, I'm going to let you go, and I appreciate the time you put forward, but I want this from you. Will you give me a 1 month update, one-on-one, a month after school goes back? Will you pull out a half an hour to sit down and chat with us again?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
So I'm going to click end broadcast here and chat with you offline. Do you have any last words for anybody? Anything you want to sign off? Any last bits of homework you want to assign the listeners?
Well, I mean, my theme here has been, take this time and find out what's important and work on that. What's important to you, what's important to your family, work on those things, because we're not going to get another time like this where just life pauses and you can, stop your everyday hustle and bustle and focus on some things that really matter to you. So this is the time, whether it's relationships with family members or your health or your fitness routine, your education. There's tons of online information out there for free. That's for free right now. There's tons of opportunities to increase your finances right now if you have the right tools. People, companies are waiving your car payments and your lease payments and your storage payments. Call these companies and take advantage of this time to get ahead.
And with that, I'll say I love you all and thank you all very much. Everybody, have a great day. And